Always seemed to me that the Squamish Indian Band were a band that knew precisely what they were doing. Joe Mathias is the chief. And did I know your grandfather?
My grandfather, yes.
Maybe it was your father.
I think it was my grandfather.
I want to ask you a little question. Have you got a Mercedes-Benz like Derek's and up in West Bank?
No, I don't have a Mercedes-Benz.
Why?
I ask for one every Christmas, but I don't get
Why don't you have one?
Controlled by the people.
All right, that's the point. Now, is the Squamish Indian Band doing well financially or not these days?
We're quite satisfied with our progress in the last 10 years. We've got a long way to go, and we're proceeding to improve our conditions.
And do you do this independently with the revenues you receive from your various lands and leases, or are you under the aegis and control of this much-hated Indian Affairs Department?
Well, the Department of Indian Affairs still exists as an entity. Certainly we take advantage of whatever programs that are coming down our way, but to a large extent. Our development is based on our own general revenue.
How many people did you say in the Squamish Band?
About 1,300.
1,300. How many of them are on welfare?
About 40%.
Should they be?
No, they shouldn't be.
Well, why are they on welfare? You've got your big lands at Part Royal. I know you've built buildings at Part Royal. Don't know anything about your money. You have control over other lands. You've got big trailer park underneath the bridge.
Difficult question to answer. First of all, I think we must take into account that we're located right here in the midst of one of the third largest metropolitan area in Canada. And I think some of the problems that our Indian people are facing are the same problems that the Chinese, the East Indian, the Scots
everybody else
are facing in Vancouver. That's the problem we're facing.
That's not a fair question of mine, because we've got millions, we have got millions now in society, and we still have a large proportion of disaster cases.
I think the steps that we are taking, we're also a very young population, and the educational programs and the involvement at the community level with our young people is emerging, so that we expect that as the years go by and the generations start maturing, we expect that a great deal of our social ills will be resolved.
Okay. What do you want as rights not yet recognized under the new charter? What more do you want, I'm saying to you?
Well, before I answer that question, I think I'd like to make this comment about what is included in Section 34 of the Charter, Canadian Constitution. They're talking about existing rights. I think that's too narrow, that's too limited. I don't know what, I think they could have added 2 more words, pre-existing and existing Aboriginal rights. If they've done that, I think we're talking about the rights that were existing before the settlement of Canada, and that those are the Aboriginal rights of the Indian people. When we look at the word existing Aboriginal rights, it almost implies it's those rights that exist after the settlement of Canada by non-Indians.
Yeah, that's the way I would read it. It's really, to put it very bluntly, the right of occupation, conquest, and development. And that's the way it's happened in every country in the world that I know of.
Yes, it just assumes...
You move in, you take over the land, and if the Aboriginal people survive, they get little bits and pieces. And you don't expect Canada to be any different. You don't really think that the white man is going to say, okay, take it all back, do you? It would wreck his society, wouldn't it?
That's right, it would.
And he is in the majority.
At this point in time, yes.
And of course, one of your problems is that politicians will never give you a straight answer to a straight question. Isn't that right?
Never have.
No. Even Trudeau wouldn't give me one the other day, nobody else. Existing rights means what's down on paper or what we have to recognize. But in your claim on owning the whole country, the courts and the parliament will say no. Don't you agree? Don't you fear that then?
That's the great fear that we have.
I was going to ask you, some Indian leaders talking about spilling blood. That's nonsense, isn't it?
Well, Jack, maybe it isn't. If you take a look at the condition of the Canadian Navy, maybe we should go to war with Canada right now, but I don't think that spilling blood would resolve anything. It's never resolved anything anywhere in the world. I think that our position is that we have to negotiate with people, and we're trying to do it with some common sense, and I think that that's the way we're going to proceed.
Come to a reasonable settlement down the road. But you're totally against assimilation. Are you totally against assimilation?
Yes, yes.
Now we come to the biggest problem of all, if you people are serious. This is Bob Warren of the United Native Nations, and he tells me 100,000 Indian, part Indian, and Métis. What do the United Native Nations want specifically from the Charter?
First of all, I think that we want the right as Indian people to identify what our membership consists of. And that is the position that the United Native Nations have always held, is to ensure that those people of lineage ties to the tribal groups are identified and are involved in all negotiations with the tribal groups that...
All right, let me ask you a question. You are I hate to use these racist terms, full-blooded Native Indian.
Not
Not
no,
quite.
not quite, no.
All right, what constitutes an Indian who has lineage ties? If my great-grandmother was an Indian, does that make me part of your organization?
There is still a lot of room for negotiations regarding
Half
definition.
Indian?
The discussions that have prevailed, I would say, is a discussion about quarter blood.
Quarter blood. So if I'm quarter blood and I want my share of the native wealth, you'll take me back in.
Well, it's up to the individual tribal groups because...
Isn't it a danger, though, that a lot of crafty white men will get in there for what they think might be a share of loot in the years to come? You'll finish up as a diluted ethnic group. And I hate these terms, but...
That's one that's been prompted by government. I think that kind of image is that there's nothing but a bunch of non-Indian people that are waiting to get on the reserves, take advantage.
Some truth in that.
There's a possibility, yes, and this is why that we must rest the authority in the tribal groups, because they know their people, they know the people.
Okay, having got your people back into a tribal group and accepted by the tribal council, not merely a northern council, but somebody in Ottawa, what do the non-status Indians, and I'm talking about the United Native Nations, what do they want in British Columbia?
Well,
How much land?
I don't really think that it's a question of land as much, particularly for the non-status Indian people. The non-status Indian people are in most cases, integrated into the white society.
Why can't they stay integrated in the white society?
Well, the prejudices that prevail really disallow any kind of success the way that things are going now. And
So you want to make them back into tribal members of tribal groups?
for those people.
Okay,
That,
question. Will you people accept them?
Yes, in our claim, we talk about status and non-status people.
You don't want self-determination, do you?
Well, I think everybody in this world wants self-determination.
I'm talking vis-a-vis Quebec, which wants self-determination.
No, we see ourselves as being a part of Canada.
Are you willing to take part in our democratic processes?
Yes,
Elect people to office
yes,
under our system
yes,
and accept the rulings of our courts, I suppose.
yeah.
Questions to these three distinguished gentlemen who have been very clear with me this morning after the break. Before I go to the phones, one question to Joe Mathias. You're not really going to claim Stanley Park.
Definitely.
Now, don't pull my leg.
No, we're not. It's a serious claim. Mind you, we have to strike an agreement between the Squamish people and the Musqueam people.
Why?
Overlapping boundaries, overlapping territories.
I mean, don't tell me the Musqueam people are going to take over the UBC.
Perhaps. They've already laid claim to that. I think it's very significant what George Watt said this morning, is that they had 15 Indian bands in his territory. And they've struck an agreement where they're laying an overall claim, and they've resolved their differences.
That's good to see. At least it's out on the table.
Yes.
People can see it and say, goodness gracious me, or what's to that effect. But in your overall final claim, you'll throw in Stanley Park, even if it's only titular ownership.
False Creek, Stanley Park, BC Place.
You won't get it. Tell you that right now.
Well, it's there for claim and it's there for discussion, and the courts are always available.
Unless you're Jack and the Giant Killer. You're Jack and the Giant Killer. I mean, don't be daft, George. You're not going to get BC Place. Bennett's just putting $1 billion of our money into it.
That's why he's doing it so quickly.
Calls. Now, you're not pulling my leg, are you?
No.
I mean, because George will accuse me of whipping up the media, wouldn't you?
Yep.
And I'm not. I'm only reporting what you're saying to me with a straight face. Go ahead, please.
Yes, well, first of all, I agree really with what you're demanding. At first, I thought it was a lot. You know, I really didn't know what to think. But I've been around conditions like that. I grew up in Saskatchewan, and I'm sure I agree they're getting worse. Something has to be done. The prejudice is too strong, and I don't think that you could be integrated. But, you know, we're getting a new constitution now. Are we not considered equal in that sense? I can see.
Well, what about, are we not considered equal in the Constitution?
Well, I can see them as sort of their group and our group. And I'd like to know, like, how will we benefit from all of this?
How will the white man benefit? The non-Indian.
Yes,
You can't
right.
say white man. How will the non-Indian benefit from all of this?
Well, he'll be able to tell the rest of the world that Indian people are being treated equally. See, it's one thing to talk, to have it in the Constitution and say that you're equal in that. But when you live on a reserve and you have large unemployment and you have a lot of people with social problems and that's when the word equality goes out.
So do we.
Yes, we do, too.
We do too.
Well, I
Grace
think-
McCarthy's everybody's kicking by right at the moment. So do we. Alcoholism, welfare problems, housing problems by, you know, although our expectations of affluence may be too great.
But ours is disproportionate for our population.
Yes, I agree that.
Okay, ma'am. Go ahead from Victoria.
Chief Mathias, I was just wondering what, regarding the assimilation of Indian students into our school system, I think is wonderful. But I feel sad that places like Kuper Island have been closed down as an Indian residential school. I worked there for a year.
Okay, just a minute. I don't want to get into specific spots. I'm trying to keep on the broad topic, old chap. And do you know anything about Kuper Island?
Oh, I think it's good that Kuper Island closed down. I think those residences have been a great detriment to our people, and I think the best thing that ever happened here in British Columbia is when they started shutting down those student residences.
Student residences on Kuper Island for Indian youngsters.
Yeah, more. I think they
Oh,
were.
yeah.
I think they were being used more for kids with problems, and I think that we have to attack those problems straight on and not ship those kids off
Agreed
to
to that.
residential schools.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to point this question to any one of the three gentlemen there.
Yeah.
And you figure that you, as a group, have the same, more or less, human rights as anybody else that was put on this earth?
Well, of course they have the same human rights as anybody else. You'll have to be more specific. What are you getting at?
Well, what I'm getting at is, sure, things in Canada aren't going so great, and it'd be nice to be able to go out, find a piece of land, and be able to live in the bush, but why is it that the Indian people should be the only ones to have that right and not everybody else? That, you know.
Does that question make sense?
I'll answer that question. I answered that question in 1975 in Terrace. I told the labor groups there, I said, once you settle with the Indian people about their land claims, you're going to recognize that you people have got a land claim. Because I don't believe that anybody should have to pay $30,000, $40,000 for a piece of property to build a house. I think every Canadian is entitled to a piece of land where they can live.
Well, that kind of shatters the mixed free enterprise democratic socialism we live in, and you're not liable to break that down because,
Well, you
I mean, we've seen one, the first kind of affluent tribal council leader I've seen was Derrickson this morning with his Mercedes Benz. Do you want to produce Scalbanias as well as us? Is that your
No,
kind of
no.
cultural drive?
No, exactly the opposite. I think that's why a lot of non-Indian people have a hard time dealing with our claim, because they look at it in white man's real estate values.
Right? That's just
And,
precisely what I've been doing this morning.
So to getting to this gentleman's question, I think that's a problem that non-Indian people are going to have to resolve with their governments, that they're going to have to convince them that land should become available to people to build on without having to buy it off block brothers.
Do you have a hope?
Well,
The
I-
whole so-called democratic system of ours is based, although it's not in the Constitution, on property.
No, I think that the non-Indian people have been fooled. They allow 10% of their population to rule them,
The non-Indian people. No, we've got a vote. We can throw the rascals out.
but you never do. That's the problem.
We might do one of these days. We've done it in Victoria. By the way, do you have politics, gentlemen? Would you call yourself an NDP or a social center?
No, I am an Indian politician, and very importantly, I don't think that any of the parties that have been in government have really served in the best interest of the Indian people.
Traditionally, in the old days, Joe, Indian leaders were big-time liberals. How about you?
I don't belong to any party.
And you, George?
I belong to the NDP, I guess, because my father was a longshoreman for 45 years, and I think I've inherited that.
Right. Next one. Go ahead, please.
I would like to ask, in this very difficult situation, how far back in history the sorting out of who owns what land among the Indians themselves is going to be done? For instance, are the Kootenays in East Kootenay going to be able to have the Piegan part, which they were shoved out of at a certain point? And what about all the tribes who moved west from Ontario and
Good question.
pressured the people in northern Saskatchewan and Alberta? I'll hang up while I listen.
Yeah, that's a good. She says that the Kootenays lost land to the Piegans, I think it was. You wouldn't have any claims on that because you're only claiming really since the white man took effective control.
Yeah, that's right. I think there were many wars before the white man arrived in this country, and what we're talking about, what was the final situation when the white man landed here? What were the tribal areas?
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm calling about being a quarter native and getting the land rights and the Indian rights, etc., and so on.
Perhaps.
And my mother is full-blooded Eskimo. Okay, now I'm half Eskimo, and my sons are quarter Eskimo. Now you mean to tell me that I can just go and claim Indian rights?
I don't know what the Inuit situation is in that on blood lineage. Do you, George?
Yeah, they're talking the same thing as us. They're talking about no distinction between status and non-status. They talk about Indian people. So this lady, she would be entitled to part of the claim that's going on in the northern area.
Only if she went to live there.
Only if she went to live there, obviously.
See, I had a call this morning from a guy who said he was a member of the West Bank Band. And I had said on the air, well, it's all shared equally or whatnot. He said, look, I'm a cousin, and he says, I get nothing. Now, should he get a bit of that West Bank action if he's not living on the reserve?
Well, I think that's up to the West Bank people to resolve themselves, but generally speaking, I think that the lands that we have were set aside for the benefit and use of all Indian people.
But you can't have it both ways. You can't live in the white man's society taking all his benefits and then still get your quota, your percentage from your reserve property, surely.
Why not, Jack, if it's going to better our situation?
Hello?
No. That's a kind of glib answer. I'm saying that if there's a non-Indian living down here who claims as a quarter blood or a full blood or whatever you a share of that profit, he's also living in our society, working in it, being educated in it, being looked after in it, being pensioned in it. Why should he get 2 bites at the national cherry?
Or are you saying that the Indian people who are well off shouldn't be getting benefits?
I'm inclined to think that about the white man too, that the far too many people get automatic benefits which we can't afford to give.
That's why the control has got to be with the band council, so that the people who aren't very well off, the people who need education, that are helped first.
Last call from Quesnel. Go ahead, please. Hello. Where's Quesnel? Where's Quesnel? Oh, wrong one. My fault. Sorry, everybody. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Webster, I was just wondering what happened in Britain if the McDonald's went back and claimed Glencoe. It's the same situation.
They'd finish up in jail.
Yes, the thing is ridiculous. It's all out of proportion. We're living in a new era, and we all want to be united. Well, why can't we just live together and share the wealth we have, and also, at the same time, share the responsibilities we have?
I think that's what you're saying in different ways.
Yeah, that's...
Gentlemen, I'm grateful to you. I just want to wrap it up once. 100,000 non-status Indians, quarter blood, tribal council, back into the tribal council, and share in the Indian rights and claims, right? Joe Mathias, unhappy with the present total land claim situation for the Squamish, but will make new claims in due course.
Yes.
You are the 4,400 square mile man.
That's right.
And I'm very grateful to you for speaking up and straightforward to me this morning. And don't accuse me of whipping it up. You're the guy that's whipped it up this morning. After the break. Just to close off this morning, the other day I interviewed Mayor Latta of Kamloops about him not going to Liberal luncheon, although he met the Prime Minister at the plane in Kamloops, and I got him on the phone, and you'll see by his letter what he's a little bit mad about. Now here's what Mike Latta, Mayor of Kamloops, has written to me. Dear Jack, I think it's important that I respond to your comments with me this morning. Particularly, I now have the Mayor of Kamloops on the phone who wants to make a two-bit name for himself. You did not provide me the opportunity to explain the grossly unacceptable manner in which the federal government has treated our city of Kamloops over the years. They changed the rules of rail relocation after we'd spent $100,000 on studies in a manner that prohibited the program to proceed. We've been promised a federal pen up to a year ago that resulted in 3 sod-turning ceremonies by 3 different Solicitor Generals over the years. This never proceeded. The Prime Minister himself, 2 years ago, introduced a decentralization program which was to assure our city a poison control center. This was conveniently dropped. We have had 12 to 15 consecutive years of airport expansion promises, none of which has been fulfilled. As for Western Canada, you know as well as I what the federal decision-making has done to us. 1 year ago, the withdrawal of the Community Services Contribution Program, which provided 20% funding off the top of all major utility projects. Please recognize that this will only affect growing provinces, namely Alberta and BC. Via rail, enough said about this. We all know that the changes affecting Western and Atlantic Canada will only principally benefit Ontario and Quebec. Changes in the RCMP contract, which will add substantially to municipal taxpayers. Recognize that 75% of all RCMP services at the municipal level are utilized in Alberta and BC. The federal budget substantially affects the growing provinces where housing needs are substantial. Again, Alberta and BC. The $4 billion Western Development Fund set aside for us has been conveniently axed from the last federal budget. Let's be fair, Jack. If you think that the above disparities reflect a two-bit politician trying to make a name for himself, then I think that the important point has been missed. How many more times must our shins be bloodied before you would expect people to stand up and be counted? Yours very truly, R.M. Latta, Mayor of Kamloops. A very good letter. And about that airport in Kamloops, through which I travel regularly. Goodness gracious me, or words to that effect. Well, you can think on this morning's program, it was purely coincidental that we had the Millionaire Band from West Bank on the air. It was not planned. Steve started working on that story 3 or 4 days ago. And you can see that there's going to be great heat over that whole problem of security of tenure for people in these parks. And remember what George Watts said for the Nuucahnolta. All they want is 4,400 square miles of the west coast of Vancouver Island, including Port Alberni. And on top of that, 50% of the control of all the assets in the sea and other substantial benefits. Existing rights is what the Constitution says. The courts, presumably, will eventually decide. And I'll be back after the break. One item I'll have on Monday is a middle management Macmillan Bloedel executive who is not happy about the form of layoff they got. Unions, number of union people are off work, number of middle management off work. This chap wants to speak out. What else? I'm working on another program too for Monday morning, but not quite sure if I can bring it off in time. But I'll be back Monday for sure at 9 a.m. precisely.